Okay, for this next video I am going to show how to add computers and users to the Active Directory on the server that we promoted in the last video to the DHCP. So I'm going to go to my virtual machine, go to the Windows 2000 server, I'm going to click on Start, Administrative Tools, Active Directory Users on Computers. Good. So the first thing I'm going to do, as you see here, the Active Directory window pops up, and it shows the server name and some subfolders within that server name. One of the subfolders says computers and the other one says users. So where we have users highlighted, I'm just going to go in here and create two users, one for myself and one for John Doe. So to do that, I right click on the user folder, come down the menu to new, come across, come to user, left click on that, and the window that pops up, I'm going to enter some information into the empty fields here. So for first name, I'm going to put my first name, it's Martin. I'm not going to put any initials, I'm just going to go straight and put my last name in there, it's Pereira. Okay, so you see my full name gets automatically displayed, and then I'm going to create the user logon name. In this case here, for the user logon name, I'm going to use the first letter of my first name and my full last name, all in common letters. So in this instance here, my username is going to be MPEREIRA, and as you see here, it's going to be created on the techneurons.com domain that we created when we promoted the controller to a DC controller. Alright, so then I'm just going to click next. Next option here, the window is going to ask me to create a set of password. One of the things that is advisable is that when you create new users, you allow the users the opportunity to select their own passwords. However, they're going to need to have a password to sign on the system. So what is best practice suggested is that you create a generic password for all users so that they can use that for their first logon. In this instance here, I'm going to use the word password as the generic password. What I'm going to substitute the A, the at for with the at sign. So it's going to be spelled capital P at sign common SSWORD. I put it a second time in there as a confirmation. Capital P, the at sign common SSWORD. And I'm going to use the option user must change password at next logon checked, so that when the user logs on for the first time, they're going to get a pop-up telling them to change their password. Okay, I'm going to leave everything else unchecked and click next. Here it's just going to show me a summary of what I entered for the user, and it says the user must change the password on the next logon. Click finish, and that creates the user Martin Pereira. I'm now going to create a user for John Doe. Right click, come down to new, come across, new user, enter username John, no initials, Doe, create his user login name J Doe. Next, do the same thing for him and give him a generic login password, same thing that we gave for Pereira, and this is going to be capital P, the at sign common SSWORD, again capital P, the at sign common SSWORD. Click next, click finish. So now we have two users created, John Doe and Martin Pereira. Next thing I'm going to do is add computers to the Active Directory. Back onto the left panel, if I go up a few folders from users, I'll see one folder called computers. So right, so if I click on that folder, in the right panel you see there are no items to show, which means we don't have any computers added in there. So I'm going to add the two computers that I created in my virtual machine. If I come down here and click on that, you will see these two Windows computers here. There are two Windows 7 PCs I have created, and I know those computer names are Windows 7 PC1 and Windows 7 PC2. So just like when we created the users, I'm going to right click on the computers, come down to new, come across, click on computer, put in the computer name Windows 7 PC1. Okay. Alright, see that first PC listed there. I'm going to add a second PC now. New computer Windows 7 PC2. Okay, so now we have these two computers created within the computers container for the for Windows PC 7, Windows 7 PC1 and Windows 7 PC2, right? But even though these computers are created on here, they have not been joined to the domain as yet. So that is what my next step is going to be. Can minimize this AD controller here and minimize this window. Go to my virtual machine and set up the Windows 7 PC. In this instance here, this is the PC2, right? That I had already opened. One things I forgot to mention. If you look on this is in the Network and Sharing Center window. So if I go to local area connection here and I go to details, I will see this computer, the IP address 192.168.0.10, subnet mask, and a DNS server entry in here 192.168.0.2. If I go back to the Windows Server machine and I go to the Network and Sharing Center for the Windows Server machine, right? Let's click on the view status here and go details. See the server IP address name here, IP 192.168.0.2. This machine, it's the DC and also the DNS machine. See the DNS server, the same IP address is on there. The current machines that I'm connecting to the server must be able to see the domain controller, the DNS, right? And so in their settings, you must have that IP address set in there for the DNS server for them. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to find the DNS, find the domain, and be joined to the domain when you add them. Then, okay. So to add this computer to the domain, the computer has already been added to Active Directory, but I have to add the computer, join the domain now. If I come up to click on Start, I come up to the computer, right click, come on the Properties, and the Properties windows open up. Where you see the computer name, domain, and workgroup settings, you see the computer name. You also see the computer as being a part of a workgroup. It's not a domain as yet, right? To join the domain, this computer domain, we click on the change settings. The option, when the window pops up, the option that says rename this computer or change its domain or workgroup, that's what we're going to select. And where we see workgroup checked, we're going to go and check domain and type the domain name. The domain name we created when we promoted the server to domain controller is technorunts.com. So we're going to type that domain name in here, TECHNO RUNTZ.com, and click OK. And we get a message that pops up asking us with a security message, and it says enter the name and password of an account with permission to join the domain. Right here is where you're going to have to enter administrator username and password that was created when we promoted the server to a domain controller. If we don't do that, we are not going to be able to join this computer domain. Okay, so type in the administrator put the administrator password in, click OK. Let's wait a bit. So authenticating itself to the domain, and then we see the message pops up, welcome to the technoruns.com domain. Click OK, and it says you must restart your computer to apply these changes. So we click OK, click close, and then we restart. Okay, let's wait for the computer to restart here now. It's not going to take very long for that to happen. Okay, so it's restarting. Computer says here starting Windows. Let's wait while Windows start up. Okay, so the computer has restarted, and we have the Control-Alt-Delete message come up for us to log on. Now, when we first initially set this computer up and logged on to the computer, we were logging on to the local machine. That's why at the top here you see the Windows 7 -PC2/Emperor. If we click on switch user here, or before we even click on switch user, if I leave this information here and I put my password in, it's going to log me up onto the local machine. But what I want to do is to log on to the domain controller, so I'll actually be logging on to the network, right? Because remember, we added the PC to the network and we added the user Emperor to the network. So if I click on switch user, and then I click on other user, you see what pops up now? We have two fields, the username and the password field, but underneath that we have log on to TechnoRuns, which was the domain we created and which is the domain we joined this computer to. So what we are going to be doing now is actually logging on to the domain and not the local machine. So in the username field, we're going to type the username Emperor that we created on the inactive directory. And in the password field, we are going to enter the generic password we created for Emperor, which was capital P, the @ common SSWORD. Enter. And we see we have a wonderful message that says the user's password must be changed before logging on the first time. And that's because when we created user Emperor and we set his password in Active Directory, we left the option checked for the user to change the password on first logon. So now we just answer OK to this here, and we get a message pop up. This is the username. The password that we see here is the old password, the password which you have signed on with, the generic password. And now we have to type a new password and confirm that password. So we're going to type that password in. And then we're going to come down to the confirmation window and we type the password again. Okay, enter that. And we see again it says changing password, and aha, your password has been changed. So we click OK here now, and the welcome sign is coming up. And what is happening now is that this user has just logged on to the domain. We get the activation windows message popped up because we need to activate the copy of Windows, but we could do that later. Right, the desktop set. Click OK on this message here as well. All this pertains to the activation, Windows activation message that we saw earlier on. So now we are setting up personalized settings for this user on this machine here, you know, and loading generic profiles and so on from the server from Active Directory as well onto the machine, the local machine here. And if we come and we click on start, we go right click on computer and come to properties. What we will see here now in the computer name and domain is that we will see computer name, and under the domain field, instead of saying work group, now we see techneurons.com, which is the domain we created when we promoted the server to our DC controller. And because we added the computer to the Active Directory, we are now able to come on, log this computer onto the domain. Okay, so this computer is now a member of that domain, and close this window here, minimize. The second computer that I had already gone ahead earlier on and joined this computer to the domain and restarted it after I did the steps to join this computer to the domain. And when I restarted this computer came up again to log into the local machine as was done earlier for user Emperor. But we want to log on to the domain, and this time I want to use the John Doe user ID instead of Emperor. So if I switch user and I go to other user, again you see it's coming up saying to log on to the domain, but instead of Emperor that I did on the first computer, I am now going to type in JDoe, put the password in for JDoe, @SSWORD, again that's a generic password, enter, and I get the same message I got for Emperor, that the user must change, password must be changed before logging on for the first time. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to type out new password in for John Doe. Okay, and just like with user Emperor, you see here your password has been changed, so John Doe now has logged on to the domain with and changed his password on the first login. Click OK. We get a message here saying the security database on the server does not have a computer account for this workstation trust relationship. So for some reason the trust relationship with this computer has not been established with the domain. So what we do, we then says OK, and what we need to do is log on to this machine here as the administrator and the local machine, unjoin the computer from the domain, and then rejoin the computer back to the domain. So I can switch the user here, Emperor, put the password I had for Emperor. Emperor is an administrator on the account, on the computer. Ask later. Okay. So if I click on start, if I click on computer, properties, okay, go to the domain here, and I'm going to unjoin the computer from the domain, change settings, change, and I'm going to change from the domain and go back to our work group. Okay. So again, it's going to ask for a user ID and password to permission to remove the computer, which will be the administrator user ID and password on the domain controller. Few minutes, I'm going to see where it says good. So this computer has now been removed from the domain and placed back in our work group. Click OK. Click OK to restart. Answer to the message. Restart the computer now. And again, it's because the trust relationship was not established when the computer was joined to the domain. So I had to unjoin the computer from the domain, set it back in our work group, which is what I just did. When it comes back up, I'm going to rejoin the computer to the domain. and re-establish the trust relationship with the domain, between the domain and the domain controller, sorry, and the client computer. Okay, close this. Waiting on Windows to start up. Alright, so I'm going to log on to the local machine here. Again, we see the activation messages coming up for the for Windows 7, but we'll activate it at a later time. So now, where the computer is now off of the domain and back on the word group, I'm now going to go and rejoin the domain. Again, right click on computer, left click on properties. Alright, and we see here the computer is now in our group, so we're going to change the settings. Hit the option to join the domain and change from word group back to the domain. Put in the domain controller name, technoruntz.com. Sorry, not the domain controller, but the domain name. Click OK. Again, we get the option asking for the username and password to have someone with credentials to join this computer to the domain. Again, not being the administrator. Password. Okay. Alright, so now we have re-established the trust with the technoruntz.com domain. Click OK. OK to restart the computer. Close. Restart now. Computer is gonna restart, and when it restarts, it's gonna be a member of the technoruntz domain after having re-established that trust relationship. Alright, you see Windows is starting up. Let it start. Alright, so we're gonna press Ctrl Alt and Delete to log on. Now again, it's looking to log on to the local machine, which is the local machine name you see here, and the local user account. But if you remember, first time when we log on with this machine, we log on as John Doe. So, and when we log on with John Doe, we also reset John Doe's password from the generic new password. So if we click on the switch user and go to other user, now we see we log on to the domain controller, so that we local machine, domain controller, the domain name technoruntz. So we're gonna put John Doe username here, put John Doe password, enter, and we see John Doe has now successfully logged on to this computer, onto the domain, and that the trust relationship was established when we unjoined and we joined the domain. So we now setting up the personalized settings and so on for John Doe, and these settings will be settings stored in his profile on Active Directory, which we will change in our next video, obviously, because we want to first off establish John Doe's credentials to be able to log on to the controller, as well as this machine being a machine on the network. Right, and if we click on the Windows Explorer icon and click on computer, right, we see we have the local machine and the local machine drive. But under computer on the left panel, if we click on network, right, okay, so I need to turn on Okay, so I want to be able to see the other computers on the network. When I click on the network icon, I see a message up here said network discovery and file sharing are turned off. Network computers or devices are not visible. Click to change. So if I click to change, turn on network discovery and file sharing, I choose that option, and I get a security window popping up to type administrator ID and password. Enter. And now I am able to see on my network tab, I'm able to see the server, and I'm able to see other PCs on the network including mine. Okay, so that ends my video to joining computers and to the server on the network, as well as creating users and adding users onto an Active Directory. Again, if I go back into the server here just to show, right? So yeah, administrator password. Right. If I did the same thing, okay, as I did in the earlier machine, first showing you and complete and an Active Directory for the computers folder, the two computers that I have there, and the two users that I have there, right? I created Emperor John Doe. I close the Active Directory and I go to Windows Explorer. I am also able here I click on the network. See, I am also seeing the server and the other two pieces that are joined to the network. Okay, good. So for my next video, I am going to show you how to configure roaming profiles and home profiles for these two users I just created here. I am Martin Pereira and John Doe, and I am also going to configure the lookup zones, forward and lookup, reverse lookup zones on the DNS controller. Okay, so stay tuned for my next video that's gonna follow soon.